It was 5:21 in the morning, still dark, and across the Texas Panhandle people were asleep in their beds when the ground began to move. In the small town of Pampa, a woman would later describe being jolted awake by what sounded like thunder rolling up out of the earth, followed by a shaking that rattled the windows and shook the walls of her house. In Spearman, homes trembled. In Amarillo, 90 miles away, hundreds of people felt it, and it did not stop at the state line. This shaking rolled outward across the flat plains and was felt in Oklahoma City, 250 miles away. It was felt in Tulsa, more than 300 miles away. It reached into New Mexico and up into southwestern Kansas. One single event felt across 4 states, in a corner of Texas where the ground is not supposed to do this. Because here is the thing that makes this story genuinely strange, the thing that has scientists right now leaning over their data and asking hard questions. The Texas Panhandle is one of the last places on the continent you would expect a powerful earthquake. And this was the most powerful one it has seen in more than 100 years. That is what we are digging into today. What exactly happened, how strong it really was, how far it was felt, and this is the part that matters most. The question the U.S. Geological Survey is investigating right now. Was this a natural earthquake, for the Earth shifting on some ancient buried fault the way it has for millions of years? Or did human beings have something to do with it? Because in Texas, that is not a conspiracy theory. That is a legitimate scientific question with a well-documented history behind it, and the answer matters for millions of people. We are going to walk through all of it carefully, honestly, with the real data and the real science. No hype, no fear-mongering, just what actually happened and what it actually means. Before we get into it, do me one quick favor. Drop a comment right now and tell me, did you feel this one? If you are anywhere in the Panhandle, Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, tell me where you were and what it felt like when it hit. And even if you are nowhere near Texas, tell me, have you ever been woken up by an earthquake? That specific feeling of your own house moving around you? I read every single one of these. And if you want to be the first to know the moment the ground moves anywhere in America, subscribe right now. It is completely free. Hit that like button too. Let us push for 5,000 likes on this one so the algorithm shows it to the people who felt this and are still asking what happened. All right, let us get into it. So let us start with exactly what happened because the details matter. At 5:21 a.m. local time on a Thursday morning, a magnitude 5. 0 earthquake struck the Texas Panhandle. The epicenter was in a rural stretch of Roberts County, roughly 24 miles northwest of the small town of Miami, Texas, and about 24 miles south-southeast of Spearman, up near the top of the Texas-Oklahoma border. And one of the most important numbers in this entire story is the depth. This earthquake was shallow, only about 3.5 miles below the surface. Now, that might sound deep to you, but in earthquake terms, that is extremely close to the surface, and depth changes everything about how a quake is felt. When an earthquake happens deep in the earth, a lot of its energy gets absorbed by the miles of rock between the rupture and the people above it. But when it is shallow, like this one, that energy arrives at the surface with much more of its punch intact. That is exactly why a magnitude 5, 0, which is a moderate earthquake, not a catastrophic one, was felt so intensely and across such a staggering distance. Shallow and moderate can shake harder at the surface than deep and large. And here's the headline that put this event in the record books, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. This was the strongest earthquake ever instrumentally recorded in the Texas Panhandle since reliable record-keeping began around the year 1900. More than a century of monitoring, and this is the biggest one the region has ever produced on modern instruments. There have been others over the decades, a quake in Carson County back in 1925, one north of Dallart in 1948, one near Perryton in the 1970s, but nothing that the instruments have measured this large in this specific region. So when you hear people in the Panhandle saying they have never felt anything like this in their lives, they are almost certainly telling the truth. For this corner of Texas, this was a genuinely historic event. Now let me be clear and reassuring about the damage, because this is important and it is good news. Despite how far and how widely it was felt, this earthquake caused essentially no serious harm. The USGS ran its automated impact assessment, a system called PAGER that rapidly estimates the likely consequences of a quake, and it issued a green alert, which is the lowest level, meaning serious damage and injuries are considered unlikely. And that is exactly how it played out. The city of Spearman reported no damage and no injuries. The Roberts County Sheriff's Office reported no damage. Across the whole affected region, there were no reports of collapsed buildings, no reports of people hurt. Economic losses were expected to be minimal. So if you are watching this, worried that a Texas town got flattened, let me put that to rest right now. It did not. This was a moderate quake in a rural, relatively sparsely populated area. And the region got very lucky in that sense. Hundreds of people did submit reports to the USGS through its Did You Feel It program, which is genuinely useful because those reports help scientists map exactly how the shaking spread. But the story here is not destruction. The story is the mystery of why it happened at all. And to understand why this is a mystery, you need to understand something fundamental about how earthquakes work and where they usually happen. Most of the world's earthquakes, the vast majority of them, occur along the boundaries of the giant tectonic plates that make up the surface of the Earth. Think of California, sitting right on top of the boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate, grinding past each other along the San Andreas Fault. Think of Japan, sitting on the collision of multiple plates. Those places are seismic hotspots precisely because they are on the edges, where the plates meet and grind and slip. But the Texas Panhandle is not on a plate boundary. It sits in the deep interior of the North American Plate, hundreds and hundreds of miles from the nearest edge. In the language of geology, it is an intraplate region, smack in the middle of the plate, far from where the action normally is. And moderate earthquakes are supposed to be rare in places like that. That is what makes this genuinely unusual. It is not that earthquakes are impossible here, it is that a magnitude 5. 0 in the stable interior of a continent is the kind of event that makes geologists sit up and pay very close attention. So the natural next question is, if it is not on a plate boundary, what caused it? And this is where we get to the heart of the investigation, the question the scientists are working on right now. There are two main possibilities, and I want to walk you through both of them fairly, because this is exactly where a lot of coverage goes wrong by jumping to a conclusion. The first possibility is that this was a completely natural earthquake. Even in the stable middle of a continent, the crust is not perfectly quiet. Buried deep underground, all across regions like this, are ancient faults. Old fractures in the rock, some of them hundreds of millions of years old, left over from long dead episodes of mountain building and continental collision. These faults are mostly dormant, but they are still there, and they are still under stress from the slow, constant forces squeezing the entire continent. Every so often, one of these ancient faults can slip, releasing that built-up stress as an earthquake. The USGS has been clear that this is one real explanation, that stress can occasionally cause these old buried faults beneath the panhandle to move. If that is what happened, then this was simply the Earth doing what it has done for eons, on a timescale so long that 100 years of human record-keeping barely captures a blink of it. But there is a second possibility, and in Texas, it is one that scientists cannot and will not ignore. And that is the possibility that human activity, specifically oil and gas operations, played a role. Now, I need you to hear me carefully here, because this is where honesty matters. The scientists have not concluded this. It is too early to determine the cause, and they have said so directly. Additional data is needed, but the reason they are actively investigating it is not paranoia. It is because Texas has one of the best documented cases of human-caused earthquakes anywhere in the world, and ignoring that history would be scientifically negligent. Let me explain, because this is genuinely one of the most important things happening beneath Texas right now. Texas is the heart of the American oil and gas industry, and the modern method of extraction produces enormous quantities of salty, contaminated wastewater. For every barrel of oil, several barrels of this ancient, briny water can come up out of the ground. The industry disposes of that water by injecting it back deep underground, into disposal wells, at high pressure. And here's the problem. When you pump that much fluid into the rock, it increases the pressure inside the pores and fractures of the crust. That increased fluid pressure can reach an ancient, stressed fault and effectively lubricate it, reducing the friction that was holding it locked and allowing it to slip. In other words, a fault that might have stayed quiet for another 10,000 years can be nudged into slipping now. Scientists call these induced earthquakes. And a 2021 study by the USGS and University of Texas scientists found that the vast majority of the seismic activity in parts of West Texas over the last 2 decades was likely triggered by exactly this: increased wastewater disposal. And the numbers on this are honestly staggering. Earthquakes in Texas have been climbing for years, tracking closely with the expansion of oil and gas drilling. In a recent year, Texas recorded more earthquakes of magnitude 2, 5 or greater than California. Let that sink in, more than California, the state we all associate with earthquakes. In just the last 5 years, Texas has experienced 7 earthquakes measuring magnitude 5, 0 or higher. This panhandle quake ties for around the 6th largest in the entire recorded history of the state. The largest ever was near the town of Valentine back in 1931. So Texas is, without exaggeration, in the middle of an earthquake surge. And the scientific consensus is that a large part of that surge is connected to how the oil and gas industry manages its wastewater. Now, and this is the crucial honesty check, I have to tell you the complicating detail, because it is what makes this specific event a real investigation rather than an open and shut case. Most of that documented industry-linked seismicity has been concentrated in West Texas, in the Permian Basin, the most productive oil field in the state. This earthquake happened in the Panhandle, which is a different region with different geology. So scientists cannot simply assume the West Texas explanation applies here. They have to actually study it, to look at whether there are disposal wells near this epicenter, to analyze the depth and the fault orientation, to compare it against the natural background. That is precisely why the answer right now is we are investigating, and not here's the cause. Anyone who tells you with total certainty that fracking definitely caused this, or that it definitely did not, is getting ahead of the actual science. The honest answer is that both natural fault movement and human-influenced activity are on the table, and the data will decide. So what comes next? A few things. First, aftershocks. After an earthquake of this size, smaller aftershocks are not just possible. In fact, one already came. A small magnitude. 1. 5 aftershocks struck that same Thursday night, about 18 hours after. The main quake, too small for anyone to feel but clearly picked up by the instruments. The city of Spearman has told residents exactly the right thing. Brace for aftershocks. Most of them will be minor, but stay alert. That is sound advice. Second, the magnitude itself could be refined. Early measurements are preliminary, and as scientists analyze more data, the official number could be adjusted slightly up or down. And third, the investigation into the cause will continue in the coming days and weeks, with agencies including the Railroad Commission of Texas, which, despite its name, is the body that actually regulates oil and gas in the state, potentially examining whether any nearby industry activity is connected. And here is what all of this means for you, practically, because there is a real lesson buried in this event. The Texas Panhandle is not a place that was built with earthquakes in mind. Unlike California or Japan, where buildings are engineered to flex and sway, much of the construction across rural Texas was never designed for seismic shaking. The USGS specifically noted that while most structures in the region are generally resistant, the vulnerable building types are older, unreinforced brick and masonry, exactly the kind of older buildings you find in small towns across the plains. This particular quake was not strong enough to seriously threaten them. But it is a reminder. As Texas earthquakes grow more frequent and occasionally more powerful, regions that never thought of themselves as earthquake country are going to have to start thinking about it. If you live in an area like this, it costs nothing to know the basics. During shaking, drop, cover, and hold on. Get under a sturdy table, away from windows and anything that can fall. Secure your tall, heavy furniture and water heaters to the wall. Know where your gas shutoff is. Keep a basic emergency kit. These are small things, and for a moderate quake, they may be all you ever need, but they are the difference between being ready and being caught off guard. Let me leave you with the bigger picture, because I think it is the real story here. This earthquake by itself hurt no one and broke almost nothing. But it is a signal. It is the ground in the middle of a continent, in a place that is supposed to be seismically quiet, producing the strongest shaking it has generated in over a century, and doing it at a moment when the entire state of Texas is experiencing a documented measurable surge in earthquakes tied, at least in significant part, to how we extract energy from beneath our feet. The scientists investigating this are not trying to frighten anyone. They are trying to answer an honest and important question. Are we living through the natural rhythm of an ancient continent, or are we, in some places, changing that rhythm ourselves? The answer to that question shapes decisions about drilling, about wastewater, about building codes, about how a whole region prepares for a future that may not look like its past. And the only way to answer it is exactly what they are doing right now, collecting the data, studying the faults, and following the evidence wherever it leads, without jumping to the conclusion that fits the best headline. We are going to keep tracking this one closely. Every aftershock, every update on the magnitude, and whatever the investigation concludes about the cause. So subscribe so you do not miss it, and drop that comment I asked for at the start. Did you feel this earthquake? Where were you, and what did it feel like? Because behind every dot on a seismic map are real people who felt the ground move under their homes, and understanding what happened is how we all stay grounded and prepared. Let us hit 5,000 likes on this one. Stay safe out there, look out for the people around you, and I will see you in the next one.